What's going on, guys? It's Jake here, and in this video I'll be talking about how much money I made on the past month on the Robinhood app. And if you don't follow my portfolio or follow my channel, you might not know, but a lot of the stocks I have in my portfolio are actually dividend-based stocks. So they do pay me a dividend, some on a monthly basis, but mostly on a quarterly basis. And in this video, I'll be showing you guys my portfolio, some stocks I own, and just overall how my portfolio is doing, and kind of break it down how it's done the past month as well. If you're new to the channel, definitely consider subscribing, and also feel free to check out some of my other videos where I outline my Robinhood portfolio, and also just talk about investing tips, tricks, things like that. But other than that, getting into the video, so with my Robinhood portfolio, it's right around $6,000 right now, and I'm going to pull it up for you guys to show it for you guys. It should be up right about now, and here's my portfolio right here. It's around $6,000, as I just said. And with my portfolio, I do show you guys, I do outline it every month or so, and just kind of show you guys all my holdings, if I've sold any stocks, if I've bought any stocks. But for the most part, I pretty much only buy stocks. I really don't sell them very often. I am definitely more of a long-term investor, and that is basically my overall strategy on the Robinhood app is long-term investing. And specifically, I also like to invest in a lot of dividend stocks. So if you look through my portfolio right here, if I just scroll down, and I'm not going to go through every stock right now, but as you can see, I do own a lot of stocks. But if you take a little closer look, and I have this part switched to equity right here, so it says your equity. And if you look at the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4 stocks in my portfolio, or what might look like stocks, those are actually 4 ETFs. And if you break it down a little bit further, I actually own about 16%, or I should say 16% of my portfolio is allocated to ETFs. And I usually like having at least 15% of my portfolio to 20% allocated to ETFs, so it is a little bit on the lower side there in that portfolio. So although as I'm going through my portfolio, it might look like I do own a lot of stocks, I think that is important to remember as well. And I actually do plan adding more ETFs and more equity of my portfolio into ETFs, because I think that is a very good and smart way to invest your money, especially if you're planning on investing for the long term. But anyways, so when you break down my portfolio stock by stock and kind of the certain types of stocks I own, a very big part of my portfolio is dividend stocks. So I'm going to kind of break this down a little bit further. So there are stocks in my portfolio like Twitter and Facebook, for example, which have no dividend yield at all. Obviously, these aren't dividend stocks, but there are other stocks in my portfolio that not a lot of people might not necessarily consider them dividend yielding stocks, or might consider them a dividend stock, because that's probably not the main reason you do want to buy stocks like these. But either way, there are stocks like Microsoft that has a relatively low yield compared to some of the other stocks in my portfolio, around 1.37, but it still has a dividend yield. And then there's also stocks like Apple is pretty similar to that has a relatively low dividend yield, but it's not necessarily a dividend stock, but it still does give me a dividend. But then you take a look at stocks like AT&T right here that has a very, very high dividend yield, over 7%. And AT&T is an example of a stock that I am definitely targeting for its dividend yield. So if we just kind of scroll through my portfolio here, Pepsi, Coke, Colgate, these are all 3 stocks that I am definitely targeting for my dividend yield. And there is a trend in this portfolio that you may or may not notice, but a lot of the dividend yielding stocks in my portfolio are either dividend aristocrats or dividend kings. So what that means is that these stocks actually have been giving out a dividend yield and have been increasing it on an annual basis for at least 25 years to be a dividend aristocrat, and then at least 50 years to be a dividend king. So I think that is a pretty good way, if you're looking to start off a dividend portfolio, to start targeting some dividend stocks, is looking at stocks like that. And then we scroll down a little bit lower, stocks like Nike, Starbucks, they do have dividend yields, but I wasn't necessarily targeting them because of that. But if we take a look at GM and McDonald's, these are 2 stocks that I am targeting because of their dividend yield. McDonald's is an example of a stock that's been giving out their dividend yield very long, along with Colgate, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi. Then if we scroll down a little bit more, 3M right here, another one that's actually been struggling of late. If if we go to the 1 year mark right here, as you can see, they're down quite a bit. But the great part about stocks like this is, again, they do have that nice dividend yield that does help supplement some losses. If you scroll down a little bit further here, stock like Boeing, I don't have them for their dividend yield, but some stocks like Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and AbbVie, these are 3 healthcare stocks in my portfolio. I definitely bought these because of their dividend yields. Johnson & Johnson has been giving theirs out for like an enormously long time. I'm not even 100% sure how long, but I know for a fact it has been at least 50 years. It is a dividend king. Then if you go to Pfizer, this is another one that also has a nice dividend yield above 3% there. And then last in this healthcare sector is AbbVie, which has a dividend yield over 4%. Then if we keep going down a little bit further in my portfolio, Morgan Stanley, I wouldn't necessarily say I target this because of their dividend yield, but they do have a good one. PayPal does not have a dividend yield. It's definitely more of a growth stock. Bank of America, KeyBank, also 2 financial stocks that do have pretty decent dividend yields. KeyBank actually has a little bit of a better one, and one that might not be as known. Then if we scroll down a little bit further, Realty Income is actually a monthly dividend stock. So this is one that I pretty obviously targeted because of their dividend yield, and same with Main Street Capital right here. They also have a monthly dividend yield, and Robinhood does not update the dividend yields as often as they should. But as you can see right here, I have been getting the monthly dividend from them. And that is one huge pet peeve of mine, is that Robinhood, this little stats section down here where it says all their like information, or at least a little bit of information about the company, Robinhood does not update this section at all, which is very annoying. Scroll down a little bit further and I want to show you their monthly dividend yield as well. If we go down here, as you can see, I've been getting that monthly dividend yield from them for quite some time as well. But as you may have also noticed, not my entire portfolio is allocated to monthly dividend stocks. Then if we go down a little bit further, Southern, this is definitely one I target for their dividend yield as well. They have a very nice one. And then if we go down to the bottom 4 ETFs in my portfolio, these are all ETFs that do have a dividend yield associated with them. And 3 out of 4 of these ETFs are actually ones that are based on dividend yields in some way or another. So the first one here, right here, ProShares S&P 500 High Dividend Low Volatility ETF. This one is a monthly dividend yielding ETF, which is pretty hard to find. And this is actually one of my favorite ETFs out there as well. They have a really nice dividend yield. After that is ProShares S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats ETF. So like I was talking about before, Dividend Aristocrats are stocks that have been increasing their dividend yield on an annual basis for at least 25 years. And this is an ETF that just simply tracks those stocks. So they have a nice dividend yield associated with them as well. Next ETF, Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. This just simply mirrors the S&P 500, but the last stocks in the S&P 500 do have a dividend yield associated with them. Then last but not least, this is Vanguard High Dividend Yield ETF. So this is a selected list of high yielding dividend stocks, and their yield is above 3% as well. So over on my portfolio, last time I checked, which hasn't been in a while, my dividend yield in this portfolio was around 3%, or my average dividend yield for this portfolio was around 3%. But 2 of the biggest reasons for it being that high is, 1, a lot of my stocks in my portfolio do have some sort of dividend yield associated with them. I don't target very many growth stocks, which I'll talk about in a second. And 2, a lot of the stocks in my portfolio have a pretty high dividend yield. So when you're talking about dividend yields, I think a safe and a pretty good solid yield is anywhere from at least 2% to about 8 or 9%. But once it starts getting above that 8 or 9%, even if it is a REIT or a monthly dividend stock or something like that, that is starting to get to the dangerous level where it's very likely that that company will be unable to sustain that dividend yield, just because mathematically, if you break it down, it does make a whole lot of sense. A lot of companies would not be able to do that over a long period of time. And a very important part of dividend investing is finding stocks that are able to give out that dividend yield for a long time, along with increasing that dividend yield for a long time. So besides dividend stocks in my portfolio, I do have some stocks that aren't necessarily associated, or not necessarily because I bought them because of their dividend yield. So like I was saying before, Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, Intel, and then also Apple. Those are 5 stocks right there that I didn't buy because of their dividend yield necessarily. Like Intel does have one and it's pretty decent, but those stocks are tech stocks. You'll find often in the tech field and in the tech industry specifically, or sector. There are quite a few stocks in there that are pretty solid and are pretty good buys in my opinion at least, but They don't have very great dividend yields, but a lot of times they have better growth associated with them. So that is kind of the risk you take, I guess, with stocks like that. Now, if we scroll down in my portfolio as well, like I was saying before, a couple other stocks, Nike, Walmart, Starbucks, not stocks I bought because of their dividend yield, just more or less stocks that I bought because I like them as a company and I thought they were at good buying points when I bought them and I would feel comfortable holding for the long term. Boeing, another one I didn't buy because of their dividend yield. There's just one that had pretty good growth when I did buy into them. I'm up quite a bit on them there. And then scrolling down a little bit further, PayPal is probably like the last one in my portfolio that, again, I didn't buy because of their dividend yield. They don't have one at all, but they are definitely more of a growth stock. Other than that, guys, that's really it for my portfolio. I just want to share with you guys all of my stocks that I bought or that I own in my Robinhood portfolio, as well as my ETFs in the past month. And as you can see, my portfolio, it definitely is more based and focused on dividend yielding stocks, but there are a few growth stocks in it as well. I think it is also important to note that about 16% of my portfolio is allocated to ETFs. And one of the reasons that that's so low is because I haven't actually deposited money into my portfolio in a while to buy more ETFs. And also, my portfolio overall has just had some pretty nice growth over the past few months or so. So that allocation kind of gets smaller and smaller because my ETFs do not grow nearly as high as a lot of my individual stocks if you broke it down. But those ETFs are there to add safety and add a little bit of or lessen the risk of my portfolio rather than the individual stocks. But other than that, guys, it's really this video. So definitely let me know below how you're doing with your investment portfolio, whether it's on the Robinhood app, on Finance, Webull, doesn't really matter. Definitely let me know in the comment section. And also, if you're new to the channel, definitely consider subscribing. I talk about the stock market, personal finance, entrepreneurship, things like that. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff and you're not yet subscribed, definitely consider subscribing. And also, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to smash that like button. It really helps a lot with the algorithm. And also, if you hated the video, feel free to hit the dislike button. It's right next to it. Doesn't really matter either way. Still helps me out a lot. But other than that, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed.